Welcome to Session 5, Parenting Tools for Foster and Adopted Children, Emotional Social Interventions. So in Session 4, we discussed how children develop in a quad, and that quad consists of physical, intellectual, social, and emotional areas. And in the last session, we discussed the physical and intellectual, but today we're going to talk about social, emotional, and I struggled parenting with this one, so I'm excited for you to give us some tips that I could have used 10 years ago.
What we have to really understand is that healing doesn't happen in therapeutic techniques and interventions. Healing happens in relationships.
Right.
Day-to-day, boring, mundane relationships. You know, parents are the best healers for their children.
Yeah.
It's not taking them to someone else, it's having
Say that again.
relationship.
You need to say that again.
Parents are the best healers for their kids. And so I think we have to look at two things. We want to look at how do we build and maintain connections with our kids. So we'll look at connecting tools.
Okay.
And then we might want to look at just kind of how do we do it ourselves.
Yeah.
Because one of the things about this journey is I've had to change as much as my kiddos have had to change.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The journey is really about changing us as people. It
Exactly.
stretches you to be better in every aspect.
It does. So let's look at some connecting tools. You know, we live in a fast-paced culture, and I'm sure you see that in all the realms, families first in
Yes.
the ministries. But here's the bottom line. We can't have quality time without quantity time.
Yeah.
So we have to be willing. You know what? Your kids do not need to be in every sport that's out there. Remember, these kiddos struggle with transition. They struggle with being overwhelmed with senses, and we're running them from thing to thing to thing. So you can't have quality time without quantity time.
And you sacrifice, and it
That's
is
right.
it is a sacrifice. You know, for our biological kids, we had to slow the train down for the adopted kids, and our biological kids had to realize that at times
Right.
I wasn't going to be the one driving them to every activity. I was going to rely on some friends to do that, and while that was hard, teaching them that helps them know why you're doing it.
It does. And I think, you know, if I had to look back and say, I will tell you that the best times we ever had with our kids were, quite frankly, on the vacations that terrified me, because I'm from a Jewish background. My ancestors camped in the desert, and we learned camping's not a good thing.
No. But camping is great.
But we
Yeah.
did take a couple camping trips, and my kids, it was awesome. They'd sit around the campfire, and we didn't have phone reception, and there was no
there's
social media
distraction.
And they created these great games, and they talked about things that they had never talked about, and they just have amazing memories. And so can't have quality time without quantity time. Second thing is we got to learn to be boring.
Yeah.
We do not have to run kids from place to place. I can't have a relationship with you if we are always focused on something else.
Yeah. And be boring and not look at your phone and keep up with 50,000 friends, because
right.
we can't keep up with everything and have quality time with multiple children, especially if you're trying to develop a relationship.
Absolutely. And we need to learn to wait. You know, it's funny, we often talk to our kids about delay gratification. You don't have to have it now, but so many times we want to be on our timetable with, okay, you've been in my home for 3 months. All these problems should be done. Well, you know what? Connection doesn't happen like that, because depending on the child's level of trauma, depending on their experiences, it may take a long time.
Well, and like my kids, they had 9 and 12 years in another situation. I couldn't expect them to feel a part of our family in 1 year.
Right, right. And then, and I think this may be the most critical, as parents, we have to lay down our agendas.
Yeah, for sure. You know, my kids have always, my biological kids, moved through school easily and done well. And when I adopted, one of our children had never been in school. Grant, who was in the first video, or in the last video actually, he was 9 and had never been in school. They thought he had some issues that they kept him with the toddlers. And so he had this crazy record. He did 3rd grade twice, 4th grade once, 5th grade twice, 6th grade, skipped 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, skipped 10th grade, and did 11th and 12th together and graduated just a year behind. But considering he missed the first 4 years of school, he made up. But we had to be very creative with his schooling. He had to go to different schools. He had to change schools. We had to find the right school. There was a lot to work through because, of course, he didn't learn to read till he was 10. So, yeah, no agenda. You got to be creative.
That's right. You know, I'm not the author of this story, I often say. I'm just a character in this story.
Exactly.
And if I follow my storyline, life is a lot easier.
Yeah.
So here's some other things I think for parents that are important. Be proactive. Get out there and advocate.
Advocate, yes.
Put things in place. Quit being surprised. You know, when we know trauma children do certain things, and we have that in our head, then when it happens, quit acting like the world has come to an end.
Yeah.
Okay, it happened. I've heard that. I know why. Now, let's be proactive and put something in place for the next time.
Well, and I think this really freed me up even with my biological kids. I had them on this little track, and I never thought that there was anything different. And then when we adopted, our kids had to do things differently, and I became proactive in exploring more schooling options and thinking, okay, well, there's more than one way to do things, and not to freak out that a child had to repeat a grade if it was in their best interest, or not to freak out that a child had to go to a different school if it was in their best interest, and kind of just taking the initiative to think differently and outside of the box was very freeing.
It is. That's really good, because I remember, you have to understand, both my husband and I have multiple higher level degrees. We're very pro higher education. And we let one of our kiddos drop out of high school before he graduated because he was going to be 63 before he could graduate. And school was his trigger point, and it was causing so much stress for him that we thought, this is silly. Let's get him trained in a career that he can do and stop subjecting him to what we think is normal.
You know it, and we had the opposite with one of our adopted children. She was so extremely off the chart bright that she was goofing around in school, so we decided to homeschool her. She whipped through college, in high school in 2 years. Well, she was only 16. There was no way we could send her to college, so we started exploring things, and she wanted to explore the military. She got into the nuclear engineering program in the Navy.
Wow.
And went at 17. So, again, think outside the box. You never know what you're going to
That's right.
discover.
And we've got to learn the cues.
Yeah.
With our kiddos. You know, think about a mom who's pregnant and she's doing this, and dad comes home from work and says, hi baby, how you doing? Baby's born, mom does this, and all's well with the world. Well, let's take a great situation. Mom's in college, she gets pregnant unexpectedly. Best case scenario, prenatal, no drugs, does all that stuff. But you know, she's not doing any of this because she knows she's not going to be able to parent that baby, and she's going to hand it to someone else. And then the boyfriend, who was the love of her life 2 weeks ago, is now coming home every day and screaming at her, how did she let this happen? Because I guess he had nothing to do with it. And all those maternal stress hormones pouring into the right side of baby's brain development. Baby's born, we hand baby right to mama, adoptive mama, who does this, but baby's never had that. So we call that becoming attuned. Okay. If I know my child, we also have to learn to monitor personal emotions. My husband has the greatest statement, I've loved it, and he said, you know, a kid can push my button in once, and then it stays stuck, and they can't do it again.
That's awesome.
Critical to know.
Because they do learn to push your buttons, so you gotta.
That's a survival skill.
Yes, and hypervigilance. They're very used to figuring adults out of fear.
Right. And I think finally, if need be, fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
You know, we're walking into a child who already has a history, and it's really more like dating than having a baby. And so understand that sometimes that takes time.
Yeah.
And it's not these kiddos' fault, and sometimes they can be so unlikable because they're so scared.
Yeah. And if you had a biological child, you know that the chemicalness of that delivery and everything creates a bond, and you have to recreate the time for that to feel a bond with your adopted child, especially if they're older.
Very good.
Yeah. These are some great practical social and emotional tools that will help us attach with our child and create that safe environment where they feel loved and safe. That's the important thing initially, is the safety. This was hard for me because I had had a different experience with biological children, and because I had biological children in the home, I was trying to maintain their safety and security and relationship and develop one with two very different children. And I have to say, for me, this was an intense time, the first couple of years, where I really had to rely a lot on my faith. And I know, if I didn't have that to fall back on, that I had been called to do that, a lot of times I would have second guessed and been really unhappy. And I really feel that having that faith is a key ingredient. If you have the support of a church community and other people who are praying for you, it just makes your peace and comfort that much stronger, because it can be, for a mom in particular, I felt, a trying time. Do you find that a lot in the mothers that you counsel with?
I do, and I think having a like-minded community is critical, because people who understand and get these kiddos to wrap around you are essential.
So while we were talking about creating a social emotional environment that's safe for your child, I want you to feel free and empowered to create a social and emotional environment for yourself, where you get the support to then be able to pour back into that child. All right, that was session 5. We are going to move into session 6 next, and that is going to be very practical, because you need communication tools to be able to better connect with your child, and they may be slightly unusual or things that you haven't tried before. So we look forward to discussing that next. Good.